Welcome back for another video. Who's the number one all-time FPL manager, the best ever? FPL Research and FPL Form have got their own all-time manager standings, and there is one manager in first place, Tom Dollymore. There are one or two other all-time leaderboards out there, like Scout have got him number 2 for transparency, but you're about to see why it's hard to argue he's not the best ever on rank history, and you might have never even heard of him. He's got a brilliant analytical mind, and he's a humble manager as well. He said, in his opinion, Ben Crellin's the actual GOAT, because he wouldn't have topped those leaderboards without Ben's work. His average rank over the last 6 seasons is 4.1k. He's got an 11k finish in there. That's his only rank outside top 10k over that run. So to give you some context of what I'm about to tell you, I had an idea last year. What if, for the first time ever, the number one all-time FPL manager documented his season with us, shared his team, his transfers, and his thoughts every game week? So Tom and I got chatting, and that's exactly what's going to be happening this season on the channel for the first time ever. So you're going to get some variety and content here as well now. You'll get all of my usual stuff, but an extra series with Tom. So Tom's essentially going to be recording his own team selection videos, which is really exciting. We've agreed to do 5 game weeks initially, and let's see how it all goes. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he grows into it over the season. So this is the last time you'll hear from me in Tom's FPL series. I just wanted to introduce it to you basically and give you the context. We did consider recording together, but getting the schedules to align is easier said than done, so this will be the perfect format, and I'm really grateful Tom agreed to do this. And I will of course be doing my own team selection videos as well, so you're essentially now spoiled for choice with extra content, and to be honest, from a far better manager, given he is quite literally rated as number 1 on a few leaderboards. So just for this first ever video, I've asked Tom to tell us a bit about himself and his style and anything we could learn from him, and then he'll get into his team selection for Gameweek 1. So show him some love. Over to Tom.
Hi everyone, my name is Tom Dollymore, and if you don't already know who I am, I'm currently the number 1 ranked FPL manager on the FPL Research and FPL Form live rankings. I'm super excited to be taking part in this video series to finally be able to share some of my thoughts and feelings on the game. If you want to follow how I deal with different situations in FPL, then you've come to the right place. So just a little bit about my background in the game. I actually started playing because a friend at work asked me, do I want to play FPL? And I said, what's that? At the time, I actually didn't know anything about football. I hadn't really followed football my whole life. I've done 7 seasons in the game now, and that first season, considering I had no knowledge of the game or football really, I actually ended up finishing 39,000 from winning the work league. Having said that, most people at work had given up throughout the season. In terms of my approach to the game, I have a very analytical approach. So that first season with in the work league, the first thing I did, because I had no background in football knowledge, I actually took a list of all of the players in the game for that season. I took all of their scores from the previous season and their prices for the new season, and then ran a list of points per million, and that's how I picked my team in the first season. So that season was actually the season after Mo Salah had scored 33 goals in the Premier League, and I didn't even know who he was. So that was my first season, finishing 39,000th. After that, the following 6 seasons, I've finished with an average rank of just under 4,200. So yeah, that first season, learnt a bit about football, learnt a bit about the game, and then from there I've kind of gradually refined my process. So now my approach generally revolves around using data models. Throughout this series I will always be referring to the data models as the baseline of my decision making. So there's many reasons for that, and it would take a while, maybe a whole other video, for me to explain my thought process behind why data models are the best way of playing the game. That being said, it's not like I just look at the models, click a button and follow what it says. I essentially use the data models to generate ideas, and then I'll use what I've learned about the games in recent weeks, things that I know are happening in the game, maybe changes of position, injuries, that I'm aware of, and I'll think about those bits of information, and I'll take into account whether they are included in the data model or whether I need to mentally adjust for that bit of information. And then if I can, I may feed that information back into data models and rerun solves to come up with new ideas and new paths, and then I'll consider those paths and think about what the best path may be. So that's sort of a general outline of my approach. Like I said, I could probably do a whole other video on all of this stuff and my approach and why and how. I think that gives a good outline of how I approach the game. Now we can jump straight into how I'm approaching this season. To start with, I think how I usually approach a season is I like to pick a team that has as few risks as possible and is kind of set as almost like a set team that I don't plan any initial transfers in the first few weeks, or hardly any transfers down the line at all. So the reason for that is because I think at the start of the season we have the least amount of information about the team's potential minutes for different players, how they're going to line up. Obviously the transfer window is not closed, so we don't know what's going to move. So there's a lot of variables in the first few weeks and uncertainty. So I like to pick a team with no plans for moves because I know that I am likely going to have to use transfers to deal with the uncertainty to some extent. So as sure as I try to be about players and their minutes, inevitably even I get it wrong and I have to deal with that. So I'll essentially set a team, and with it, when these things happen in the first few weeks, I'll react to them with the transfers rather than having pre-planned transfers. I think this season is obviously quite different because we've got these extra chips to deal with. That sort of throws into consideration, am I going to use any of those chips early, I suppose. I think a lot of people are having the same sort of deliberation. So I think my thought process on this, my initial thinking was I'll get the bench boost out of the way early. That's the hardest one to plan for, the hardest one to incorporate, because you have to, at any point when you use it, you have to make sure that you're going to have 15 players who are going to start and are going to score points to some extent. And as we all know, as you progress through the season, you get injuries and you have to deal with them. And like I said at the start of the season, there's always uncertainty to deal with anyway. So my initial thinking was use the bench boost early, and then I tend to always, as I've said, I deal with uncertainty with transfers, but I tend to always use an early wildcard as well. So usually I'll deal with the first few issues in the team that come up. There's only been maybe a couple of seasons where that hasn't happened, and I've been pretty plain sailing at the start, but I'll usually deal with the first couple of issues, and then there's usually a turning point usually in the first 6 game weeks where I suddenly see what I think the template or the future template is going to be, and I'll use my wildcard to jump on that before everyone else. I think I trust my own instincts, and I think that's what gives me an edge. So there's always a turning point where I'll suddenly see what the template's going to be, the fact that my team is quite far away from it, and that everyone's going to start moving there. So I'll wildcard and switch to that template early. I don't always get that 100% right, but I can usually get it close enough and then start filling in the gaps with transfers, which is even easier now. You can use transfers carry transfers across to after the wildcard. So my initial approach was going to be less bench boost early, set a team up for it, knowing that usually I'm going to wildcard early anyway. I think currently I've moved on from that now, and I'm actually thinking there's so much uncertainty at the minute at the start of this season that I can't rely on setting a team that's going to be able to bench boost early effectively. And I think, having looked, if I set a team with a sort of rough plan to bench boost maybe game week 8 onwards, I think my team would be a lot the same as if I had planned no chips, so like a normal season. So I think I'm planning on starting this season as I normally do, but with a slight rough plan of bench boosting around 8, maybe a bit later. But in planning to do that, my initial team is actually pretty much the same as it would be without any plans. So I'm pretty much just starting as normal now. Free hit, I think I've always had in the back of my head that I'll just use that reactively, or when an opportunity arises. I think that one's much easier to just work in at some point than the bench boost. So all my initial sort of chip plans are going to be looking for opportunities for the bench boost and trying to work towards that. Eventually I will pick somewhere down the line, but yeah, just starting as normal. So jumping into my team as it currently is. Goalkeepers, I've got Sanchez and Dubravka. Dubravka, 4 million, likely to... I know that there is a little bit of uncertainty at the minute about whether he's going to start the first game week, but I think as soon as you have a £4 million goalkeeper, I think it almost becomes a no-brainer. So yeah, Dubravka, I think, is definitely going to be in there. And then the other one is Sanchez. I think all of the sort of top teams, the goalkeepers are priced at 5.5. And I think the fact that Sanchez is priced at 5 and Chelsea are, I mean, in my view, are now up there with the top teams, I think that kind of... usually I wouldn't look at 5 million plus. Usually I'd limit my goalkeeper budget to sort of 9. Usually that would be 2 4.5s rotating, but I think this year with Dubravka emerging and Sanchez being in a top team at 5 million, I think that's the way I'm going to use my 9 million. Defence, I've got Pedro Porro, Murillo, Nico Williams, Anderson and Esteve. Now, defence this season, I think quite a lot of the time is about filling in the gaps for the rest of your team. So there's loads of defensive options this year. I think there's even more options with the defensive contributions now. So there's so many options, and the defenders that I've picked are mainly the options that fit at the right price points to fill the gaps. And it's more about selecting the right midfield and forwards, and then the defence will then be filled in looking back from that. So moving on to midfield, I've got Salah. I'm still sticking with him. I know a lot of people are shying away from him, but I think just keep it simple at the start of the season. He starts against Bournemouth, just keep it simple. There's always time to adjust. It's not going to be a disaster in any way. It's fine. Palmer, I think he's I think he's pretty much a lock in my team as well. Bruno Fernandes, I think at 9 million, and assuming that Man United are going to improve on last season, I think at 9 million he would be a good pick anyway. But the fact that he regularly hits the defensive contributions now makes him even more ridiculous. So yeah, I think Bruno Fernandes is going to be locked in. I've also got Anderson from Nottingham Forest. I think he's not quite locked in, but he's fairly locked. Yeah, I think he's good at 5.5. Then I've got Tielemans at 6 million. I really like him at 6 million. I just think he's a good all-round player. I think there is a slight element of we're not sure on the penalties, and if he doesn't have any penalties, then maybe he goes out. But then again, if he takes all the penalties, then he'll be crazy at 6 million. Then moving on to forwards, I think this is the hardest category at the minute. At the moment, so the draft I've got at the moment is assuming that Solanke is going to be there or thereabouts fit at the start of the season. And the reason this is my current main draft is because I feel like he will be. We'll see. I've got alternatives that I'll share if he's not. So at the moment I've got Solanke in there, Watkins, and to be honest, any 4.5 million, but I've got Mark Guiu because at some point he's probably got the most potential to get good minutes, or some sort of minutes. So that's my front line at the minute. If Solanke's not fit at the start, or we don't get any information that he's nearly there or potentially going to start game week 1 or potentially going to come on game week 1, there's two options. I'd do Strand Larsen instead of Solanke, and then I think that's the same for both alternatives. I'd probably bring Strand Larsen in for Solanke, and I'd either have I'd do Tielemans to Wirtz and Watkins to Mateta, just because I think without Solanke in game week 1, you need some sort of Liverpool player to fill in that gap in game week 1 against Bournemouth. The second option, again getting a Liverpool player, would be to again Solanke to Strand Larsen, but then upgrade Nico Williams to Virgil van Dijk. So those are kind of my current alternatives if Solanke's not fit. In terms of alternative players in all positions, I think goalkeepers is always the toughest one to get right. I think there's so many ways that goalkeepers can score points that it's almost impossible to pick the right one at the start of the season or at any point in the season. You never know which one's going to go on a scoring streak or going to score big points next. So, but a couple of the other ones that I'd say would be options, Petrovic and Verbruggen. In terms of defenders, some of the other defenders I might consider, and again, I'm mainly filling in the gaps with defenders, so there's not really any nailed defenders. They would all change if my midfield and forwards changed. I would fill in the gaps with the right defenders from a large variety we've got. So alternatives that I haven't mentioned: Tarkowski, Senesi, any of the Palace defenders. I think, to be fair, any of the Nottingham Forest defenders are probably fine. I think that's about it. But there's a lot of other options I haven't mentioned, but there's just so many. But those are the sort of the standouts for me. Midfield now, as I've said, I've got Salah, Palmer and Bruno Fernandes are pretty much fully nailed. Anderson partly nailed, and then that sort of leaves one sort of gap. So I haven't got a huge list of alternatives for midfield, but Dewsbury Hall, I think he's good if he gets really good solid minutes, but he's a bit of a minutes risk there. Matoma is a good option. Wirtz is always a good option. I did mention Wirtz in one of my alternatives, but I just, with Salah, Palmer and Bruno Fernandes in, I just prefer the balance of my team with the money spent elsewhere. Gakpo, if you think he's going to get really good minutes, then he's definitely up there. I'm being a bit conservative on his minutes. There's a lot up in the air with forwards, so outside of the ones I've mentioned, I think Evan Nilsson is fine. Wood, I know Forest have struggled with scoring in pre-season, but I think Wood's still an okay option. I do prefer Mateta at the minute, but at that price point, and obviously Solanke, he'd definitely be in if I know he's starting. Gyökeres, he's good if he gets really good minutes. I'm a bit on the edge with that. I'm being conservative in minutes, not trying to take too many risks. So he's in the mix, but not for me quite from the get-go. Vissa is interesting because I think he's an option if he stays eventually. If we know more by the deadline, but I don't think we will. If he stays at Brentford, I think he's an option, definite option. But then again, if he goes to Newcastle, I think he also becomes an option potentially. So, but we just don't know. So we can't really go with him from the get-go. But yeah, he could pop up as a definite option. And then Ekitike again, depends what happens with Isak. If we know that Isak's going to Liverpool, but then not knowing is also just as bad. So being conservative with his minutes again drops him out. I think that's kind of all of the forwards in the mix. And again, it all depends on. There's a lot depending on movement in the transfer market for forwards, and it's the most difficult bit to deal with at the minute. But when that all falls into place, that then we know sort of the core of the midfield. So those last two one or two midfield places and the defence then kind of follows. So everything's kind of relying on the forwards. So I think that's everything from me for this video. That's all my thoughts for the start of this current season. Good luck with your season. I'll catch you in the next video. Hi everyone, my name is Tom Dollymore and I am currently the number one ranked... No. Hi everyone, my name is Tom Dollymore and if you... No. Right, stop. No, do another. I think that's all from me for this video. Let's do one more. One more. Hi everyone.